Many of you, if not all of you, know that back in February, we tragically lost our little girl anymore. She was 20 years old, our daughter Hannah. And all of our speaking and preaching really since then has been geared around. We talked about loss. We've talked about facing death, different things like that. And then starting on, I believe it was Palm Sunday, we spoke about this series that we've been working on, Heaven. And we've been working on, to me, that has been a therapeutic series for me. I have been blessed and I wouldn't say healed, but encouraged. And this series has counseled me and imparted some sort of hope to me. And we're not done with that series. We took a little bit of a break from that. Last week we spoke message on grief because I sensed we needed to speak that message, and this series is kicking off tonight on Wednesday night, 6 weeks, which I'll be here facilitating it and maybe saying a little bit, but most of it will be a DVD sessions, 20 minutes to a half hour long with Dr. Norman Wright. Dr. Wright is the fellow that oversaw all September 11th grief counseling. He oversaw Columbine grief counseling, the Ohio church shooting. He was the guy they call in and fly in all over the country in these big-time situations like that. I emailed him his website anyway, trying to connect with him to see if I could even talk to him on a personal level, and he called me the next day personally. I talked to him 45 minutes, and he'll be talking to my wife very soon too. So I've been very blessed by him, and we got this series for him. So with that said, I want to say this Sunday morning, I really sense it's going to be the first message I will speak that's not related to the loss at all. It's just something that has been stirring in my heart, and it's got a little bit of an ember burning in me, unrelated to heaven, unrelated to losing my daughter and the grief process. So it's just going to be a standalone message that I don't get it off my chest. I have to get it off my chest. I just got to get it off my chest. That's a good thing, by the way. That's a good thing, 'cause I haven't had much on my chest lately. In fact, I have something to get off my chest is a good thing. And then we're going to kick back in again, on the Heaven series. About 3 more messages on that. We're actually going to put together a thing on that, because that's going to be about 10, 12 messages long when we're done with it. So with that said, before I kick on to the video, which is 22 minutes long, so I have time to take up some time here to have you out by within the hour. If you have a pen and paper, I would suggest you get that and take that on Wednesday nights. You'll need it. Norman Wright has you write things down and stuff like that, and I'll borrow a piece. And he's going to lead you through an exercise in this first session I think you'll find helpful. Now, if you're like most people, if you're like me, you don't like touchy-feely stuff. You don't like sharing your feelings with people, especially if you're a guy. But sorry, he's the one doing the seminar. I'm not me. I would never make you do that, but he's going to make you do that type of stuff. And I think you'll find it helpful if you just go along with it. Now, this is something I do want to get. This isn't related. I had this in my notes for Sunday morning. Not related to the message on grief. I didn't include it because of time, but it's something I think it needs to be taught. In when we're facing loss and we're facing, in our situation, death. Many of you, if not all of you, have lost somebody in your life. Some of you have lost something in a tragic sense, like we did, that I did in my family back in February, and many of you have faced other things. I had 3 people today contact me with deaths in their family. 3 today. 2 of the people that contacted me with deaths were under 20, 20 years old. I've received, I'm guessing 100 letters from parents from around the country that have lost children since February. Because my story went a little bit more viral and was a little bit more public, and getting in contact with me is pretty easy. A lot of people took that and they sent me their story and told me of their account. Talked to somebody online today that lost their 17-year-old daughter to a gun accident 1 month after Hannah. They were watching Hannah's case, following it on the news when it happened. So it's amazing how much grief is out there. But this is something in the many blogs and the many writings that are on the internet, and there's some pretty blogs are an interesting thing. Sometimes they're educational, sometimes they're just cruel. And people say some of the cruelest, meanest, if I can just be honest with you, and I know I will be, stupidest things. And because they can get away with it, they hide behind some weird name, and it can never be attributed back to them. So, and there was a couple 100,000 blogs concerning my daughter, a couple 100,000 that was out there. There was a lot of them out there, and I didn't read many of them, but some of the things I did read, there was this one occurring theme that just kept coming up, and there was this continual argument between people on these blogs. And this was the theme. It says, when I said in my daughter's memorial service that the Lord called Hannah home, he said, he was wrong. Satan took her. That's what they said. Satan's responsible for that. And I just want to say here unequivocally that you are wrong. Because I haven't said anything about this yet, but like I said, I'm on a soapbox, I have a microphone, and so you are wrong, okay? And let me tell you why I think you're wrong. Let me put up Hebrews chapter 2 real quick. This is a theological fallacy. And a lot of people think just because something bad happens, that Satan is behind it. My friends, the Bible tells us it rains on the just and the unjust. The unjust die young, and the just die young. The unjust face ruin, and the just face ruin. Life offers no guarantees for anybody. And it'll come against you in any way, and it's not because you're a Christian necessarily, or not because you're a non-Christian necessarily, even though God takes, as we know, everything and makes it something valuable in our life. Hebrews 2 verse 14, because God's children are human beings made of flesh and blood, the Son, Jesus, also became flesh and blood. For only as a human being could he die, and only by dying could he break the power of the devil who had the power of death. So by dying he broke the power of the devil who had the power of death. Only in this way could he set free all those who live their lives as slaves to the fear of dying. So he says that Jesus broke the power of the devil who had the power of death. So, as a Christian, who has the power of death? God has it, not the devil. I just told us that. That's black and white. So I have other verses here. I'm just picking out a few of them. I don't have this one on the screen, but in Ecclesiastes 7, verse 1, a good reputation is more valuable than costly perfume, and the day you die is better than the day you were born. Psalm 68, verse 20. For he that is our God is the God of salvation, and unto God the Lord belong the issues from death. So who belongs the issues of death? Not the devil, God. The last enemy to be destroyed, 1 Corinthians 15:26, is death. So death was destroyed as an enemy, and I can attribute that. Death is, to me, it's promotion now. It used to be something that I wasn't waiting to haste upon, but now I look at death now as that's the answer to the curse. That's finally restoring me to the place I was always supposed to be since my creative being, to walk with God, to talk with God, and to be with the people God has brought in my life. And here's the final clinchers right here, and then we'll move on. And the Lord said unto Satan, Job 1, verse 12. And there's other verses. I'm just showing you the ridiculousness of that argument. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put forth not thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of God. So Satan comes and says, I want to afflict Job. He says, you can do all this, but don't touch Job. And Satan says, okay. And he leaves. So who controlled Satan in that debate? God controlled him. Now Satan comes back for a little bit more bargaining with God, and go to Job chapter verse 21. I don't even have that verse. I forgot that particular verse. And he said, naked I came out of the womb, naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's not the main verse I wanted. I wanted to go to Job chapter 2. But I happen to have a Bible because I brought my Bible to church. There you go. This is a parallel Bible, with very small print. But that's why I have glasses. I brought my glasses to church too. It says this. Let's see if I can find it. they're talking about Satan comes to God and says, look, of course Job's still worshiping you. You haven't touched him personally yet. And Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath he will give for his life. But put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he'll curse you to your face. That's God talking about Job. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. Verse 6 of Job chapter 2. So he said you can take his health, but you cannot take his life. Who controlled Job's days on earth? God controlled his days on earth. Your days are controlled by God. Let me define grief, and then we'll dive into the Norman Wright series video. Grief is the state where we are in. Grief is the state we are in when we have lost a loved one. This is just a random thing that I put down. It's an inward look. You've been called into the house of mourning. It is not a comfortable place. It is not a place you want to reside, but for a time you must. Often it will hurt, confuse, upset, and frighten you. It is described as intense emotional suffering or even acute sorrow. That's a definition, a working definition of grief. I pulled it, I think, from one of the authors. I think it was Norman Wright. With that said, I'm going to play this first video for you. It's about 22 minutes long. It's a break in the middle. It doesn't break the video, but he's going to have you write some stuff down and chart some things and then talk amongst yourself a little bit, all fit in the next 22 minutes. This is probably the slowest of all the 6 videos. It's more of an introductory video, but I think you'll be blessed. Let's play that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. H. Norman Wright.
Thank you. I'd like to share a little bit with you about my family situation. And this is Mozart, or I call him Catzilla. He's actually my therapy cat because he comes in and he sits with people and they pet him during the time, and you find that petting an animal, your blood pressure tends to drop and you're much calmer. We have another cat there, and I think this picture is best depicted by the word attitude. That is an attitude right there, folks. And then this is Shadow. I use Shadow as a therapy dog. He comes in with individuals, and I do have one fellow that comes in and just picks him up and holds him in his lap during the entire time. And this is the reason that we moved to Bakersfield. This is Shaylin, our granddaughter, who's adopted, and she's 1/4 Korean. So she calls me Papa-san, which is actually Japanese for honorable man over 50, because I didn't know the word for in Korean for grandfather. And this is part of my therapy of what I like to do, is spend time fishing and not thinking a whole lot about what I'm doing. And, this is the last picture that I have of Joyce and myself, taken about 4 months before she died, about 1.5 years ago. And so that's a little bit of my family background and family situation. Just start off with a story about Joyce and myself. We were fishing in the Buffalo River up in the Grand Tetons, and Joyce had caught a couple of small fish, and all of a sudden her rod went down like this, and she said, "Norm, I got a big fish." I said, "No, you're stuck on a rock, Joyce." No, this is a big fish. I said, "Joyce, trust me, I'm a man. I know. You're stuck on a rock." And all of a sudden she said, "But Norm, rocks do not swim upstream." And all of a sudden, "You're right, you got a big fish." So she got the big fish in and held it up for her, and she says, "Oh, I want a picture of that fish, but all the pictures you have of your fish, they're bloody, they're icky. I want mine clean, so clean it off in the water." Well, I knew how strong fish are, so I grabbed that fish and I was washing it, and it lunged, and it got away. And I knew I was a dead man. And usually when fish get away like that, they just swim, but this one was floating down the river. And she said, "Well, Norm, it's floating. Go fetch it." So I ran after it, and I lunged for it, and I missed it. And I went all the way to the bottom of the river. And I came up, and I hear her yelling, "Norm, it's still floating. Get it!" So this time I ran down the river, and I got in front of it. And when it came down, it nestled in my hands, and I grabbed it. And I had it. And Joyce, who was quiet and reserved, is up there standing, yelling, shouting and everything, because what was lost was found. The problem is, what we lose often isn't found. It's a permanent loss. And that's why, it devastates us. And loss begins actually when we're, with children. You lose a favorite toy, or you drop an ice cream cone in the dirt. I've seen adults cry over that one. It's not just the kids. You don't get a gift. A friend starts playing with somebody else. You don't get the favorite teacher. You're skipped a grade and you leave your friends behind, or they're skipped a grade and you're left behind. And there's divorce. Or your parents get remarried and you're no longer the firstborn child anymore. You're the thirdborn and you don't have your own room anymore. And so all these losses begin to accumulate. A classmate dies, a grandfather dies, the pet dies, you gain weight, and you can't get rid of it, or you catch the tooth fairy in the act. All those are losses that occur. The 4 major losses for children as they're growing up is the loss of a grandparent, the loss of a pet, divorce, and moving. And moving, that really impacts a child. And then we get to the stage of adulthood, and we have all these other losses, and we're going to look at a number of them as we go through this today. Now, you have a fill-in outline in front of you, and there's places for you to write and to take notes, and sometimes I'll have other material up here which won't be on that outline, but it will be on the additional papers that you'll have. And so one of the things we want to do is to make a difference between loss and crisis and trauma, because there is a distinct difference. A loss produces an ache in a person, this emptiness, sort of a sadness. And it's like there's a bit of a hole in your life when the loss hits you. And we go through life with many different kinds of losses, from small ones to the large ones. But then when the loss moves to a crisis throws you off balance, and you're in a state of shock, and you can't think very well. There's panic, and there's uncertainty that's going on in your life, and it's like there's a fog that just exists not outside of you, but in your mind, and things just aren't clear anymore. But the worst event that can ever happen to any of us is what we call a trauma. Trauma is a wounding. It rewires our brain. Our brain isn't functioning well. The left side and the right side isn't working, and it just overwhelms our senses. Now, I tend to be visual, and I like to see things with a picture. And so what we want to look at is how the loss or a crisis or a trauma actually impacts our brain. Because sometimes we wonder, what is wrong with me? Well, what's wrong is something is going on upstairs that isn't normal. Now, we have a right side of a brain and a left side. And first of all, let's establish the fact that all men have brains. I know sometimes you wonder. All women have brains. Okay? And so when a loss hits, it's hitting our right side, more the feeling side of it. Now, you still might function pretty well. You might be still going to work, but you're working at 80% of your capacity. And the left side, the thinking side, hasn't been impacted that much until you get to the place where you experience a crisis. And now when the crisis hits, there's a numbness. You're stunned. It's like somebody came up to you with a mallet and they hit you over the head, and you're seeing those proverbial stars. And there's shock, there's disorientation, and people might say hello to you, and you say hello back, but you wonder, who was that person? It's the neighbor that's been there for 10 years. But the worst impact on our brain is when there's a trauma. It overwhelms the brain. It makes the left side and the right side not work together anymore. And you're not functional. And if this trauma happened to you as a child, it sort of overwhelms all of your life. You see life through the veil of the trauma. And trauma, though, you want to remember, is something that we can get over. But many of us here have experienced trauma firsthand or in a secondhand way as well. Now, in recovering from trauma, one of the things that we want to let you know about is that you have to move more to the left side of your brain, the thinking part of your brain. Because if the emotions are just shattered and overwhelming us, we're not going to function well. Recovering also means making sense of what happened in our thinking part of the brain, where you can stop and say, now I understand what happened. This is what went on. Now it's starting to make some more sense to me. One of the things that we want to make sure that we understand is that the tendency we have in our culture is not to deal with loss or grief. We don't want to talk about it. We want to talk about the winners. And what happens often is that as we're growing up, we tend to bury our losses and we don't deal with them. But the problem is, when you buried a loss, you have buried it alive. And someday there will be a resurrection of it, and you won't be in charge of it. A number of years ago, a gentleman came to see me by the name of Jim. Jim had been clinically depressed for 12 years. Now, even 3 months of clinical depression is sort of overwhelming, but for 12 years, he had struggled with this. And he wasn't really functional except at work. And the reason he was at work, he owned the business, and he had to be. Well, he came in and I worked with him for about a year. And during that year, we discovered something. He had experienced 5 major rejections over the past 20 years that he had never dealt with. He'd buried them alive. And so I sent him to a medical doctor for some help with medication to break the cycle of depression. And Jim began going to a church that he'd never gone to before called the Vineyard. Well, at the Vineyard on Sunday evening, they would spend maybe 40 minutes singing and praising and everything. And one day Jim came in and said, Norm, do you know what I do on Sunday night? No. I'm going to that worship service where they sing and they praise so much. And you know what else I'm doing? No. I'm leaving my family at home. And I didn't know where he was going with this story. And he said, and do you know what I do during that service? No, I have no idea, Jim. Tell me. I'm crying. I'm weeping. I am grieving over those 5 rejections that I never grieved over before. And in 3 months' time, I saw this reactive depression, clinical depression, lift. And 2 months later, I said, Jim, I don't think we need to meet anymore. I think you're doing fine. And so I didn't see him anymore. And about 2-3 months later, his wife came in. It was after Christmas time. And I asked her the typical no-brainer question. How was your Christmas? Oh, it was wonderful. Well, what did you receive? My husband. Jim taught me to ask everybody I work with the question, what is the loss in your life that perhaps you've never fully grieved over? And over the past 15 years, about 80% of the people have come back and said, you know that strange question you ask? And I usually come back with, well, which one? Because I ask a lot of strange questions. Well, the one about loss. Yeah, I remember it. Well, I've discovered something recently. And all of a sudden, they began talking about it. And that's why it's really important for us to take a look at our loss history and what might have occurred in our life. And I want to share one with you. And this one is for Eric Smith. You don't have to write anything down. I'll just describe what happened. Eric was born in 1964, and then his first loss, his dog died. And then he moved, and that vertical line that you see going up and down, well, the length of it depicts the intensity of the loss. And so then a friend moved away, and then his parents divorced, and then he lost partial vision in one eye. Now, notice those are solid, which indicates he's never fully grieved over those. He's never fully resolved those. Then he discovered a tumor in his leg, and then his wife miscarried, job transfer to the East Coast, a closest friend died in a car accident, his mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and then you'll see another line where it's solid, and that's the one indicating where his uncle died in the towers in 2001, and he was never found. He's never been able to resolve that one. And the last one was his daughter left for college. And so that's his history. What I'm going to ask you to do right now is to take that page you have in front of you, and I'm going to ask you to draw your own loss history. Now, you're not going to share this with anybody, so you can put down the birth date. They're not going to find out how old you are. And just go ahead and start out and try to remember what was that first loss and how intense was it. And then you'll go to the next one and just keep on going, and I'll give you several minutes, and then we'll talk about what we can do with this. I'm going to interrupt you at this time and ask you to stop. And I'd like you to turn to a person next to you and share, what are you experiencing right now as you are looking at your loss history? What are you experiencing as you're looking and doing your loss history right now? Would you share that with the person next to you, please?
We're going to, can we fast forward that to the next, it's not much really left after this, but we're at 8 o'clock now, so, and no one wants to share with each other. Can we fast forward it? I'll go all the way to the end if we do that. All right. Sorry, guys. Just talk amongst yourselves. Come on, open up, let your guards down, be vulnerable. Transparent. I did it. My wife makes me.
Thank you for the way you jump in and share with one another. I'd like to find out from some of you, what were you thinking or feeling? What did you experience as you did this? Could I just hear from a number of you? Just raise your hand and just with a couple, 3 words. What did you experience? Yes?
Despair.
Despair. Okay, what else? Yes? Sadness. Yes? You felt overwhelmed. Right. What else?
Grief.
Grief. Okay. You what? Pain. Okay. This is very normal. It brings back all those feelings, but it's the first step in taking a look to see, where am I? Have I not grieved over certain losses? Now, we just started this today, and one of the things that we discovered is that it works best if you will take this home and leave it out for a week. And every day, come back and visit the lost history, and then you'll realize, oh, I forgot that one, or I forgot this. And pretty soon, this begins to, you get some completion to it, because it takes a while to remember all these, especially the older we get. We've got much more of a history at this time. But all of a sudden, you begin to look at those, which will give you a roadmap on what you need to address and to go ahead and to deal with. But we don't want to leave it there. When you have finished your loss history, then go back and, using the top part of that chart, start enumerating the different blessings that you have experienced in your life. Because sometimes we can focus just on the losses and the pain, or there are some people that just focus on the good things that happen in life and they deny the other. But we want to get a balance. And this is something that you can do that will give you some direction. I received a letter the other day, and you might be interested in this letter. And it's on how to bathe a cat. And it said, please forward to cat lovers everywhere who, like myself, are very concerned about their hygiene. And so how many of you own cats? Could I see the hands? Oh boy. How many of you own dogs? How many of you own both? A bunch of us. Okay. Well, here's the instructions on how to bathe your cat. First of all, thoroughly clean the toilet. All right? Now, add the required amount of shampoo to the toilet water and have both lids lifted. Obtain the cat and soothe him while you carry him towards the bathroom. In one smooth movement, put the cat in the toilet and close both lids. And you may need to stand on the lid so he can't get out of there, okay? Now, don't get any part of your body too close to the edge, because his paws are going to be reaching out to grab anything that he can. Flush the toilet 3 or 4 times, which provides a power wash and rinse, which I found to be very, very effective. Have somebody open the door to the outside to ensure there are no people between the toilet and the outside door. Stand behind the toilet as far as you can and quickly lift both lids. The now clean cat will rocket out of the toilet and run outside, where he will dry himself. Sincerely, the dog. And a picture really takes care of it. And so here's our happy dog right here. You want to see what the cat looked like? There's the cat. One of the gifts that God has given to us is the gift of laughter. Even in the midst of grief, we can laugh, because it's a way of taking a break from the heaviness and from the pain of what we are going through.
That is it. It just cuts off abruptly at this point. I'm not sure why, but it was almost over anyway. We'll continue this next week. It'll be session 2 next week. There's 6 sessions. They usually go about a half hour, 35 minutes long, something like that. Once we're done with this series, we'll probably take a few months off and then offer this in a home group. One of our home groups we'll go through it again. I would recommend you do what he said, though. I mean, this is go back, do that grief chart your grief, look back through your life, and it'll take you a while. It would take me a while to do it, and then look back and just chart it like he did it with the bar and the graph, and get a good picture of your life and your losses and your grief and potentially trauma. I mean, not everyone suffers trauma, but many do suffer trauma. Trauma can come in many different forms. It could be by the bedside of a loved one for a long period of time as they slowly pass from cancer. It could be in a car accident. It could be something that happened in my family. And it can come in many different forms that when it imprints your brain, as Norman Wright told me personally, he said, your brain has been tattooed. That's what he told me. And so go back and write this stuff out. You'll be shocked sometimes what you may have not remembered when you let yourself go back and think it through and grasp onto it like that. Because we have a tendency to like to delete stuff and bury. And it's a defense mechanism that God has given us to protect us. But unfortunately, that will also eat away at us unless we allow it to ourselves to resolve it and work through it. There is no necessarily, I don't want to say healing by some of these things. I don't think we ever get healed from a loss, because a loss will always be a loss. But you learn how to live with it, and you learn how to keep it in perspective, and then the loss at some point won't hinder your life and cause you certain reactions and responses that you may have. But anyway, enough of me rambling here, but go home and do that chart, and we'll continue with this next week.